Hello, ladies and gentlemen. And all of our non-binary folks out there listening on the radio waves. It is that specific time of week. What specific time of week is that? Well, it's that time of the week where we come on to your radio waves, talk about what the mainstream media is not talking about, dig underneath the headlines, talk to activists, local and abroad, discuss politics at the local and the national level, and generally call out the establishment on their BS. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. Now, as always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM, WIDR Kalamazoo, or Western Michigan University. Oh, no matter how dope or insightful they may happen to be. So, where we go and start this week, talking a little bit, this is an update on an issue that we've talked about many times on the show before. But there is a new development. This comes from Bridge, Michigan. It's a news website for our wonderful, lovely state. This actually falls under their rubric of Michigan Environmental Watch. And we, of course, are talking about everybody's favorite pipeline, Line 5. And I say that you can't really feel the air quotes over the airwaves, but when I say favorite, I mean, no, nobody really likes it. Heck, a lot of Republicans who live in the coastal areas of Michigan don't even like it, because if there's an oil spill, well, not only is that ecologically destructive on a massive and disastrous scale, but it would also hurt a lot of the tourist economies in the coastal towns of Michigan. But I digress. So why am I bringing up Line 5 again? Well, Enbridge are pledging to build a $350 million tunnel to protect Line 5 in the Straits of Mackinac. And I think I'll go ahead and read from the article and then kind of chime in with my own little observations intermingled. Michigan Governor Rick Snyder has ended months of speculation about the fate of Line 5, Enbridge Energy's oil and gas pipeline in the Straits of Mackinac, and a magnet for environmental concerns. And I do actually want to bring up Rick Snyder himself, Mr. I Poison Flint, was actually, for a while, considering whether or not to let Line 5 remain in the Straits. So even all the way up to the governor's desk, a guy who, literally is sided with big interests and austerity over the people of Michigan time and time again, even he was concerned about the danger of Line 5. Just to tell you where we were just about a month or so ago. Enbridge plans to swap out the 65-year-old Straits section for new pipe to be buried hundreds of feet below the lake surface. And the Canadian pipeline giant would fund it under a deal with the state of Michigan signed Wednesday and subject it to other regulatory approvals. The agreement would also bolster projections for vulnerable water crossings outside the straits, state officials said. So let's go down a little bit and talk a little bit more about the minutia of this bill. So the project outlined in Wednesday's deal carries a price of about $350 to $500 million. It's expected to take 7 to 10 years to complete. Enbridge would pay for its design, construction, operation, and maintenance for up to 99 years. The effort is subject to approvals by the Mackinac Bridge Authority, the independent state agency that operates the iconic bridge connecting Michigan's peninsulas. Mackinac Bridge Authority I wonder, maybe give them some phone calls, possibly, depending on how you feel on the issue, I suppose. So, I'll really hammer this point home when I'm done reading the article, but 7 to 10 years. We were talking about a decade that's slightly over the terms of which an entire governor's administration can occur. Talking about building this and baking in its continued operation and maintenance for as long as the next 100 years. It's extremely retrograde and, obviously, or honestly, not particularly surprising. The big thing that really separates, corporate Republicans from, say, corporate Democrats is that while, a lot of corporate Democrats have been cozier to fossil fuels than is really necessary, or that does not necessarily meet their rhetoric. Good example would probably be California Governor Jerry Brown. In a lot of ways, he is leading the way in this country for building green energy infrastructure, but at the same time, he's also allowing fracking to take place in the state of California. So, the big difference being here, so Jerry Brown, would be considered like a liberal governor. Republicans, because they essentially get paid to misbelieve facts about climate change, see fossil fuels as a perpetual resource that we can tap into for, in perpetuity, which of course is not the case. And if we actually did that, we would all die. So, gotta go let a co-host in real quick. We'll be right back. Talk more about this subject. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Joined now by my co-host, Lawrence. Say hello to the people.
Yeah, what up?
Yep. Lawrence, you just joined in. I was just giving everybody an update about Line 5. So, here's the situation. They've offered to build a nice little insulating tunnel. It'll be so much safer so that, it'll make it less likely that it'll be a giant catastrophic oil spill. Let me just here's a quote from the opposition, i.e. Crazy leftists like us think we need to get off fossil fuels. This is Chris Kolb, president and CEO of the Michigan Environmental Council. They said the tunnel will take years to build, and during that time, the risk of a spill from the existing 65-year-old pipeline poses a very serious threat. At any moment, Line 5 could leak 2.4 million gallons of crude oil into the Great Lakes and cause billions of dollars of damage to our waters, coastal communities, and recreational economy. And here's an important thing, too, and I just want to quote this real quick because I think it's an important part of the conversation. Enbridge has touted the pipeline as a vital piece of Michigan energy infrastructure for meeting Michiganders' energy needs, including they cite a lot of the Upper Peninsula's demand for propane. However, studies funded by environmental groups have cast doubt on the pipeline's importance for the state, including that it instead largely just benefits Canada by moving fuel through the state of Michigan. So, I mean, again, Lawrence, we have the situation where, for a while, the governor there was like, well, I don't know, maybe it is dangerous to have, an oil pipeline in the middle of the, world's largest source of fresh water. But he's like, oh, no, just put a condom on that thing. It'll be fine. A $350 million condom that'll take about 10 years to put on.
Yeah, it's like having unprotected sex with someone and then trying to put on a condom afterwards. It's that kind of logic that we're dealing with here. We put a condom on after I was done, after you were already having unprotected sex. That makes sense. Yeah. This is the thing about Line 5, and this is the thing that bothers me when it comes to Line 5. We've already had a spill in Kalamazoo, Kalamazoo, Bell Creek area that we've never fixed.
Mm-hmm. Never fixed properly.
Not truly fixed. Flint still doesn't have clean drinking water. We have PFAS contaminants in Parchment, which is not
literally like a 10-minute drive from here.
It's not even. It's a 2-minute drive from where I live. I live on the north side. So the water treatment the water stuff that goes through Parchment does also flow through Kalamazoo treatment facility. So let's not get it twisted. Flint still doesn't have clean drinking water. Detroit doesn't have clean drinking water. An overwhelming majority of cities in the lower half of the Lower Peninsula have some type of problem with their water infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So we're going to build a pipeline that taps into the water infrastructure of Michigan. Yeah, that just sounds like it's a smart idea. That sounds like a grand idea.
Oh yeah, and
you're eating. It's like, hey, you're eating glass in that sandwich. How about I put some arsenic in there as well?
No, exactly. And it's a big thing they're touting here is well, we're giving it. There's more. There are going to be more safeguards. They're building it 100 feet below the actual surface of the lake, and I mean, again, the whole point here is, mitigating risk is one thing, but mitigating risk for a fuel source that we do not need being pumped through the Straits of Mackinac, ostensibly just in order to get this natural gas imported to Canada. That study said. This is not for the UP. This is so oil companies can export their oil cheaply.
This money is not going to benefit Americans. So this company is not the company's profit. It would be different. I would have a different feeling about it. I cannot believe that I'm about to actually give Sarah Palin credit. I would have a different feeling if we did in Michigan the same thing that they did in Alaska. So what did they do in Alaska, for those who do not know? The oil companies in Alaska, when they were drilling and doing all that stuff, the government of Alaska, which Sarah Palin was the head of, said, okay, y'all wanna drill, y'all wanna do all that extra stuff, all of your corporate profits have to go to the people of Canada. Your a overwhelming
of Alaska?
Of Alaska. Yeah. I mean, of Alaska. Yeah, my bad. Yeah. I misspoke. So it's of Alaska. The overwhelming majority of the profits that you're making from the oil in our land have to go back to the people in our land. If you don't want to do that, then you're not going to be allowed to get our natural resources. If we were doing that, I still wouldn't be for it because I don't want I want a Green New Deal. I want to do solar energy, wind energy, even thermal and things like that because it's safer. But I would feel better about it. I would be more inclined to agree with that notion because that money would be going back to the people of Michigan. Mm-hmm. And then we can put that money into the infrastructure so that when this pipeline leaks, it's not an if, it's a when.
It's a when, yeah.
We will have money and resources to fix it. because the company's not going to fix it.
Well, I mean, just look at the behavior of Enbridge before. You brought up the Kalamazoo River oil spill, and their reaction to it was, basically just get a bunch of non-disclosure agreements. Basically giving these people pennies, and not literally pennies. Like usually settlements would be around like $1,000, maybe a couple $1,000. But
what's a couple $1,000 to a company that makes billions?
And what's a couple $1,000 to somebody who's going to be suffering long-term health problems that people have been sunk into like medical debt because of the crap that was in the river next to their properties. It's been really, people have died, and it brings up a broader issue too, because like you're talking about like using those profits to reinvest in the state. Michigan is effed in that sense, because especially all over like the southern part of the lower peninsula, all of the cities, this neglect, it's been going on for a long time. It's not pretty much purposeful, and what you see, whether it's Flint, whether it's Detroit, whether it's the sacrifice zones where Marathon is just pumping pollution into the poorest, blackest zip code in the state, or our side of the state where you had the oil spill, you had the PFAS. And we have fracking wells scattered throughout. So they make they pump out this natural gas. They sell our water to Nestle for pennies on the dollar.
That's not that, and that money's not coming back to us.
And that money's not coming back to us at all. And it's like that, just that horrible, I don't know what you call it, irony or just institutional vindictiveness, where like the actual citizens of Michigan constantly get thrown under the bus so that Enbridge and all the other oil companies making money off this pipeline can make that money. It's gross.
Yeah, dog. Yeah, dog. I could not agree more. I definitely could not agree more.
So with that, do we want to move to a topic of so this is a story about a billionaire who had a little Jiminy Cricket on a shoulder. Really his shoulders were they were getting crushed by a really loud guy from Vermont, and thousands and thousands of Fight for 15 activists.
Oh man, I mean, I'm glad we're talking about this and not Kanye. I'm tired of arguing about Kanye online right now. Dog, we talk about progressive. We've argued on this show about using the bully pulpit, about getting involved, and about activism. Activism is what produces change in this country. And when you have representatives like Ro Khanna, representatives like Bernie Sanders, they get things done when you have other corporatist Democrats that will play the game with these businesses instead of putting their boot on the neck of these businesses and saying, hey, you need to calm that noise down. You need to actually treat your employees like human beings. So a few weeks ago, Bernie Sanders in the Senate put out an act that Representative Ro Khanna in the House agreed with, and a bunch of other activists agreed with. What are we talking about? We're talking about the Stop Subsidies for Stop. It was the Stop Bezos Act. It's called the. It was called the acronym. Yeah, the acronym was Stop Bezos Act. It was basically stopping the corporate welfare subsidies that we give to multinational corporations when they're not when their employees are on food stamps. So what the act basically did was, if a large company, a company that was over 500 people, had employees and those employees was on government assistance, then the amount of assistance that they were getting from food stamps, housing assistance, things like that, the company had to pay the same amount in taxes.
Yes.
So let's say let's say you work for Amazon. You're on food stamps, you're on housing assistance, or you work for Walmart, you're on food stamps, you have housing assistance. You get around $3,000 of housing assistance a year. Well, the company will have to pay the government $3,000 every year that you're on it. Now, if you're a company like Amazon, you have millions of employees, and you have a large amount of your employees that's on food stamps. That's going to put a dent in your pocket. So, Newsweek and Bloomberg and other articles had op-eds saying that this was foolish, that Bernie Sanders doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't understand how business works. Yeah, he doesn't understand. They were downplaying and basically downplaying and discouraging Bernie, Ro Khanna, and other political activists from doing this act and moving forward on it.
Yeah, I think what's the whole counter argument? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The counter argument was that the counter argument was the same thing that you hear all the time. Well, if the businesses do this, they're gonna have to raise the price on the consumers. If business does this, they're gonna go to automation. They're gonna fire a bunch of people. This is gonna hurt business.
Or even like the more kind of milquetoast Democrat position where it's like, oh, you can't just make somebody up their wages overnight. You have to phase it, bring it up to $12 an hour over a course of 4 years or 5 years or 6 years,
okay,
whatever it is they say.
Yeah. So fast forward 3 weeks, exactly 2 to 3 weeks later. 1 week later, Jeff Bezos announces that they're going to raise the minimum wage of workers at Amazon to $15 an hour. Not only does he announce it, and he says, we've listened to our critics, and we want to be arbiters of change, so we're going to raise our minimum wage to $15 an hour. He then goes on to thank Bernie Sanders. He thanks Bernie Sanders for being the arbiter of change, for being the person that forced him to do this. Jeff Bezos, the richest person in the world,
on the planet,
the richest man in the world, was made to bend the knee to a 78-year-old Jew with bad hair, like with bad posture, and an angry progressive in the House of Representatives, and a bunch of other ragtag group of activists. Now, let me also put this also in perspective. Bernie Sanders had a town hall. He had multiple town halls that the mainstream media did not cover. They did not cover. They did not want to see. One of the town halls was workers versus CEOs. It got over 10 million views on YouTube. It's still on YouTube today, and it was on YouTube. The Young Turks covered it. Now this covered it. AJ Plus covered it. All of these progressive left-wing news organizations, the mainstream media, did not want to touch it. And they forced not only Jeff Bezos, but also Disney, and the workers at Disneyland will be getting raised, and their employees are also going to get $15 an hour for working there now, because before they weren't doing so. So, a ragtag group of activists, Ro Khanna, who's a Justice Democrat, who they keep forgetting to mention, and then you have Bernie Sanders, a reason 5,625 why you don't cheat progressives and why he's going to win in 2020, made the richest people in the world do the right thing. Yeah, and
like,
come on, son. Come on, son.
And well, a couple things. So one, I heard like a Republican talking point about this. It said, "Oh, this wasn't very. It's when you have low unemployment, it drives up wages because the labor pool is more competitive." And I did want to say really quick, that does not square out in our modern economy. Don't forget that like low unemployment does not. It doesn't say anything about the quality of employment or how much people are earning in wages. While these things might have been true when we had an industrial economy based on manufacturing, we don't anymore. So much of it is the service and the gig economy. That is just not how that functions. unemployment could be close to 1 or 2%, but that still means there's going to be people out on the roads driving for Lyft, driving for Uber, making very little, like below minimum wage type of money.
That argument that you're talking about is the same argument that a lot of people use to talk about slavery. Because in slavery, there was a lot of people that the unemployment rate was absolutely low during slave times. Yeah, that's because people were slaves. That, like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, it's because people were being forced to do things, being forced to do labor and not being paid for it. Mm-hmm. The difference between it's like this. I am not as I'm a democratic socialist. I call myself a democratic socialist, and I mean, not in a. I'm more of, if we're going to be technical about this, I'm more of a. I want more of a social democracy. Social democracy, basically what Sweden, Denmark, Finland, what these other countries want. So for me, I don't look at capitalism the same way that a lot of our friends do, or much more radical than I am.
Yeah,
but
myself included.
So I don't mind people like Jeff Bezos being rich or whatever. I don't mind you having billions of dollars. Okay, cool. Make your money, do that. You can then not tell me that you cannot pay your employees a living wage. You cannot be the richest man in the world paying your employees starvation wages, and they're using federal assistance because you will not provide them with insurance. You will not provide them with a living wage. You will not provide them with dignity, and you're the richest person in the world. Get the AF out of here with that garbage. With that, and for all this is the thing that makes me very excited, because Elizabeth Warren earlier this week said that she might be running for president, and this is the other thing that made me excited. It wasn't a corporate Democrat that made Jeff Bezos do this. It wasn't a Kamala Harris or Cory Booker. It wasn't a Hillary Clinton that was going to make Jeff Bezos do this. No, it was activists, and it was angry progressives like Ro Khanna, like Bernie, that made Jeff Bezos the most powerful man in the world. Because he could have been like, Jeff Bezos really could have been like, screw all of you. I'm the richest man in the world. I'm going to go buy an island, and I'm trying to terraform the moon so I can live up there. Yeah. Like, he really could.
That might be Elon Musk.
Right, I know. But that's what I'm saying.
Super villain layer up there.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm like, he really could have just been like, nah, screw y'all, I'm good. And it wasn't just him. Disney also could be like, screw off, I'm good. You're still going to buy our products anyway. You're still going to use my services anyway. Mm-hmm. But the fact that the climate is changing, and also because Bernie Sanders and even Jeff Bezos said, I beseech my other CEOs to follow suit and to do the same thing, because they understand, they know. Mm-hmm. We are at the same wealth disparity as the Gilded Age. What happened during the French Revolution and the other times when there was wealth disparity so bad that if you got sick, you were basically going to go bankrupt or die? The peasants, the rest of us, was going to start going after these CEOs. There's only so many. The Hamptons is not a defensible position. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think it was Richard Wolff. I don't know if do you ever watch his show Economic Update?
Oh yeah.
It's good stuff. Sometimes. Yeah. But I think he said he was being interviewed by Jimmy Dore, and he said that literally the level of income inequality, like I can't remember the name of it, the index for it. We technically have. Income inequality hasn't been this bad since pharaonic Egypt. Like that's, but that keeping that in mind, you brought up something really important, which you mentioned democratic socialism, social democracy, and one of the things we bring up on the show, because most of the subjects we talk about are cemented in some kind of American history, and we talk about like the New Deal and that era. It kind of how that came about, And, you know,
the New Deal was a little bit racist, but we'll talk about that later.
Well,
We'll talk about that later.
That's a very interesting history behind that as well.
Yeah. But I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, yeah. But so anyway, you know, FDR, he did not pass a New Deal out of the goodness of his heart. You know, if he did, maybe he would have included black people. But, you know, what he did, though, what happened with the New Deal was between FDR and a lot of people in the corporate class, there was a realization, you know, the Russian Revolution was just like, you know, 12 years back. It was very recent in everybody's memory. And organized labor at that time was a lot more, well, organized. It was a lot more militant. There was a lot more solidarity. So when the corporations agreed with FDR to pay more taxes and pay into these social programs, it wasn't because they were innately good people. It was because there was so much social organized pressure against them to do this sort of things, to treat their workers with some respect and give them a social safety net, that it actually, to an extent, not all the way, again, there's a whole history behind it, but that is how programs and changes like that happened in the past. And you're really starting to see that come back to life right now between, you know, the Disney workers, the Amazon workers, you know, not necessarily structured in the same way we've traditionally thought of labor unions. You know, let's not forget the recent wave of teacher strikes. A lot of them broke ranks with their own unions to go on strike. So what you're seeing is this reemergence of kind of militant worker solidarity. And
I mean, also fast food workers, man.
Also exactly.
Fast food workers. We also, not to interrupt, but it's not like these things have not been championed before. The Poor People's Movement, during the Civil Rights era, even the Poor People's Movement that they're doing now. Shout out to Reverend Barber. Yeah. Shout out to Dr. Cornel West and others that's been helping out with that. Shout out to Young Justice and what's his name?
You're talking about.
I'll give y'all that later. But the point that I'm trying to get to is that even though people were saying that we've been fighting for these things, you have to constantly fight for these things. You have to constantly fight for them, even when you know that there's as of in the immediate moment of you fighting, there may not be change, but change is, as a OG once told me, change happens slowly at first and then all of a sudden, an avalanche. Small rocks start moving and then the avalanche come, and all of a sudden now you got the entire landscapes have been changed. This is the same thing. To quote Bernie Sanders, because the effects of the $15 minimum wage with Jeff Bezos is going to take effect next month. So for everyone who's need to find a job and needs to find a job that pays $15 or more, go check out Amazon.
I'm slightly more comfortable ordering stuff from Amazon again.
Right.
So, yeah,
I will start ordering things off of Amazon next month. Next month. Next month when these things are actually
I also want to hear. I'm waiting to hear about the working conditions too.
Oh yeah, no.
That's also a really important piece of
it. That's another thing that I also want to talk about. But just to give y'all the perspective, this is what Bernie Sanders said. He said he tweeted about this. He said what Mr. Bezos have done today is not only enormously important for Amazon's hundreds of thousands of employees, but it could well be the shot heard around the world. I encourage corporation leaders around the country to follow Mr. Bezos' lead. Jeff Bezos also tweeted. He tweeted at Bernie after Bernie tweeted that out, and he said, "Thank you at Senator Sanders We're excited about this and also hope others will join in.
Dope. All right.
Reason number 5,625 why Bernie 2020 is a thing, and this will.
All right, that's the gauntlet, everybody.
Oh no, I'm gonna tell you the final four. I'm gonna give a prediction about the final four.
Oh yeah.
The final four in 2020 is going to be Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, and Kirsten Gillibrand.
See,
that's gonna be the final four.
My only thing is, I think behind the scenes or whatever, Bernie and Elizabeth would probably have a conversation about which one of them should run, because especially Bernie, he's very strategic. I think he wouldn't want to like split the progressive vote or whatever.
Okay, so my dream, if we're going to talk about this is just a short thing before we go on our break. My dream is that Elizabeth will not run. I mean, or she'll bow out of the competition around the same time that Joe Biden bows out. So those two will bow out together. Bernie will become president because the establishment is going to split their vote between Kirsten Gillibrand and Kamala Harris. And Bernie Sanders becomes president. Nina Turner becomes vice president. and Elizabeth Warren. Wait.
Yes.
But Elizabeth Warren becomes Secretary of Treasury.
Woo!
That is the dream.
Man, I can't woo anymore.
That's the dream because that's the dream because I want someone like Barbara Lee or Ro Khanna to be the head of the Consumers Financial Protection Bureau, and I want them to re-implement all the things that they've been snatching out of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. But if you have an angry progressive like Deborah Lee or Ro Khanna there, with Elizabeth Warren being the head of the Treasury, oh my God, so excited.
Okay, so I think we should build a dream team on the show. Like just do a segment on that.
We're gonna do the fantasy teams. We're gonna do our fantasy league.
Yeah, fantasy administration.
Oh,
there you go. All right, let's go ahead and go to a break. Y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. It's the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So, yeah, I'm glad we had some good news. We had a victory to discuss, because now let's hop back on that righteous indignation. Oh,
God.
We're going to talk a couple things that have been kind of missed about the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, and we talked about it last week on the show, context of just the horrible sexual assault allegations and like the implications of the kind of good old boys culture there in Washington.
The only problem that I'm having with the whole Kavanaugh discussion is no one's actually talking about how horrible he is as a federal judge already. The rulings he's actually already done that goes against the American people. And every Supreme Court judge is going to say they're not going to be bipartisan. They're just going to call balls and strikes. That's completely BS. We all know this.
Yep.
The Democrats vote democratically. The Republicans vote republically. That's just how the court goes. The problem that I'm having is the things that Kavanaugh has actually done as a judge, as a federal judge already.
It's pretty awful.
Has been anti-worker. It's anti-woman. It's anti-civil rights. He's on record.
Don't forget, he's also sided with corporations when it came to a lot of environmental issues, basically favoring their sovereignty over the environments of the towns and cities they're in.
Yeah. So, like the whole thing with Flint, Michigan, the whole thing with Dakota Access Pipeline, he would side with the corporation ruining the water of 18 million people. That's how he works. That's him. He's about that life. And that's not being discussed, even though he is a sexual predator. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's just allegedly.
Yeah.
I want to be like, we're trying to be fair. We're going to be fair.
Oh, yeah. And well, I mean, here's what makes me angry, because you sent this link to the story, and we got to call out the Democrats too, and a lot of them have been out there. They've been outraged about, or at least speaking about being outraged, because look, yeah, they've certainly politicized this to an extent, but the Democrats have come out and talked about Kavanaugh, and I would say there is something a little extra about look, any Supreme Court pick you're gonna get from the Trump administration is gonna be a corporate tool and puppet to the highest extent, and my whole thing is like, you really can't find like a corporate puppet on that list that doesn't have these the baggage of these allegations. And what makes that so maddening in the context we're about to bring up is, the chairman of the Democratic Party, what does he have to say about this? Is he standing firm? He's saying like, no, there's absolutely no way we can confirm somebody who, on top of just being like an atrociously right-wing Supreme Court pick, also has these allegations against him. Is it Lawrence? Are you still here? Was it?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Oh, all right. I don't know. I don't know if you ran to the bathroom or something, but
I'm still here.
But what did Tom Perez? Did he put his foot down and say like, we gotta vote against it? We gotta put our hope on the ballot and then make sure we vote against Brett Kavanaugh. What did he say?
All right. So Tom Perez was being interviewed. I forgot who was being interviewed by. The interview's on. Let me actually find the link for you. Hold on.
Oh, I got it on here.
Let me find the link of who was being interviewed by. Mm-hmm. While you're finding that, Tom Perez was being interviewed by some dude, and he was basically being he was being a parody of himself when we're parodying him. That's what he was doing. But the crux of what he was saying, he said in a roundabout way, is that he will still support Democrats who vote for Brett Kavanaugh. That is not a joke. That is not a punchline. That is real facts. Do you have it queued up?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when they start talking about it.
No. They start talking about it early. Like they started talking about early. No, go back. Right when Kyle. So Kyle Kalinske from Secular Talk covered this. I want y'all to hear what Tom Perez said himself, because this is not a joke. This is not a joke. This is not a punchline. This is real facts. Tom Perez, the head of the DNC, said that he would still support Democrats who vote for Brett Kavanaugh.
Is there room in the party for senators who vote for Judge Kavanaugh?
Well, listen, the Democratic Party has always been a party that's reflected a number of values. But one of those values, I think, has been that we need Supreme Court justices who are going to be fair and impartial. And, I mean, I think if a woman had done yesterday what Judge Kavanaugh did in terms of the shrill, we would have a series of stories today that would be remarkable.
I haven't quite heard a yes or no answer on whether it's acceptable for Democratic senators.
Well, there were Democratic senators who voted for Justice Gorsuch. Okay,
which was a bit of a different situation than what we're in today.
Well, again, and that's going to be up to them. But there were Democratic senators who did that, and that is a fact. And those are Democratic senators that I have worked very closely with, continue to work very closely with, and are working to help get reelected. And so that is a fact. That's the reality of what we see now. And
you would continue to work to to reelect Democratic senators.
Of course, we're going to continue to work.
If they vote to.
Well, we don't know what they're going to do. And again, if I were a Democrat on this one, I would vote against Judge Kavanaugh.
I got to be honest with you guys, man.
So yeah, I guess like there you have it right there. It's kind of like a mealy-mouthed way.
We had Democrats who voted for Neil Gorsuch. We lead with our values, and we continue to support Democrats. No matter what their values are or who they vote for or how they vote, even if it goes against the core values of being a Democrat. I've supported Democrats who don't support the Democratic ways of being a Democrat, and I'm going to continue to support, as the head of the DNC, I'm going to continue to help elect those Democrats who don't vote and support Democratic values.
Yeah, it's we give a lot of heat, like these centrists who run the Democratic Party. The neutrality bias is, that neutrality bias is so god awful. He's just like, well, it's their opinion. If they want to vote for a right-wing zealot who, again, has all these allegations, and let's not forget too. I think some people have really focused on this, but like the really belligerent way that he acted during his own hearing, where
look. Besides, look. We're gonna forget about how he acted. Matt Damon already did a great parody of him. I'm so over if he's a liar or if he's credible. He's not. He's been proven a liar, and he's been proven a liar.
He lied on the record. Yeah, that's right.
He lied on the record. And I remember when Republicans said that lying under oath, committing perjury, you can impeach a president for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this man who's been a liar, and he's lied on multiple accounts, not even during this hearing, but while he's been a federal judge, under the Republican standard, you should not vote for him.
Oh yeah.
So for the head of the DNC to say, we're still going to support Democrats that does vote for him. We don't know if they're going to do it, but if they do, I'm still going to help elect them. Tom Perez, if you're listening to this, quit, man. Quit your job. Go find something else to do. Didn't you already take a job being a professor at a college while you're supposed to be only working at the DNC? Go do that full time. You know what? Go be a political commentator on CNN or MSNBC. They will hire you.
Oh, yeah, you make a lot of money doing that.
Stop being the head of the DNC. You are hurting our party.
Yeah.
You are hurting our chances of winning. God, Tom Perez, that is the type of Democrat that makes us angry. That's the type of Democrat that does not help our cause. Those are the same type of Democrats that cheated Bernie Sanders, and they couldn't do what Bernie Sanders did, even though Bernie Sanders is not in power. And he's the most popular politician in the United States. Like,
I mean, think about it. Like, it's like Bernie Sanders with a podium and a whole gaggle of union organizers were able to get more substantive change from one of America's biggest corporations. Like, what's Tom Perez done since he got in? Like,
nothing. No. He's purged Bernie supporting Democrats from the party. And he now also has the power to make sure that Bernie Sanders, if he's been loyal to the party enough to see if he can get the nomination for being a Democrat. So Tom Perez now has the power, the sole power, to say, you know what, Bernie, I don't think you've been loyal to the party enough, so we're not going to support you for being the nominee. He has that power now.
Yeah, and I mean, I will give him some credit for being okay with superdelegate reform, but it's this reminds me a lot of so I went and saw Angela Davis last week. Maybe we get some time later on the show. I'll talk about that more because there's some pretty dope wisdom dropped that night.
Man. I saw that live stream. I saw that live stream.
It was good. And one of the things I think it was the facilitator said. It had the room cutting up laughing when she said this, but we've basically got a political system where the Democrats don't do anything for me and the Republicans do things to me. And this is just a perfect example of that. The Republicans want to shove this hyper right-wing, super corporate, anti-environment, anti-woman Supreme Court pick down our throats, who allegedly was going to all these like ragers in college and high school and committing sexual assault, and the resistance to that is none. There's no it's like, well, we'll make some pretty speeches during these court hearings, but if somebody in our party actually votes for them, there's going to be zero consequences.
I mean, think about what the Democrats in the House, what Chuck Schumer and them did. They're pushing through a lot of the nominees that Trump wants because they want to go back and raise funds for their reelection. They are pushing. Exactly. They're pushing 1 out of 7 federal judges will be put in lifetime appointments by our president, Numbnuts, and the Democrats are not there to say I object or anything because they want to go raise money. And so the resistance, to steal a line from Jimmy Dore, the resistance is being the assistance. Yep,
that's right. And so, just to give a little context, that I think we reported on that story a couple weeks ago. But yeah, that was Chuck Schumer basically cutting a deal with the Trump administration because not only did they want to raise money, but they wanted to. It was basically to start their time off early so they wouldn't have to sit and approve federal judges who, again, have lifetime appointments.
The Democrats, I mean, we talked about this again, the military budget that just got done being passed. Only 7 people in the Senate voted against it. 6 Republicans and Bernie Sanders. So that means Elizabeth Warren. Yep. That means Kamala Harris.
Yep.
That means, wait, is Kamala Harris a senator?
Well, I mean, let's not forget. No. And I've brought this up on the show a few times, but even like people who are truly question our foreign policy, our military spending, are very, very rare in our federal government. Even most progressives, like, you mentioned Elizabeth Warren. Remember, when she was questioning Mad Dog Mattis, it wasn't about his human rights violations. It wasn't about his complicity in torture. It was about whether a defense contractor would still be in her state. So,
but again, that goes against my point. We call Donald Trump a thin-skinned, buffoon, ignoramus, And the stuff that just came out about his taxes and how he actually raised his money is something that we definitely need to talk about.
Oh yeah, I heard
dog.
Talking about that on Democracy Now!
Boy, we gonna talk about that. We gonna get into that tea later.
Yeah.
But the point that I was getting at now, we have Democrats who are going to have to fight against the judges that our president has put in place for decades on end because they're not willing to fight now. We have Democrats that say Trump is a thin-skinned buffoon and madman, yet we are giving him more money to bomb brown and black people overseas in countries that did not attack us. And then when the Human Rights Council of the UN calls us out on our BS, then we say we're going to pick up our ball and
go home.
And Trump literally said, I don't even think we talked about this on the show, but Trump literally said at the UN that we will not acknowledge the international law of the International Court, which is something that we need to talk about. Trump basically said that we are a rogue nation because if an African country, if North Korea or if any of those other countries was to say the same thing that Trump said, they would have said we would have been a rogue state.
Yeah. Exactly.
But we don't have Democrats and or consequences for Democrats who will support that garbage. They will talk a good game, but when it comes to their actual vote in power, they don't do anything about it. And that's what's infuriating. This is the reason why Tom Perez needs to be fired from the DNC. He needs to be fired from the DNC as a head of the DNC. I'm so angry when I saw this story. I was so angry, and I'm still mad to this day. I'm like, God, y'all are trying to lose. They're trying to lose.
And I think you got to understand the reason a lot of leftists get so mad about this. It's you got to understand this isn't a game to people. Whatever your kind of philosophy is about electoral politics, whether we really just need to to build something new from the ground up, having people in our current institution of power that will do the right thing is still super critical. And when the opposition party in the United States, and keep in mind, while there are many nations in Europe that have a lot of the same problems that we are currently having, including the resurgence of the far right, there are actual opposition parties that will speak truth to power and that will come out and try to defend people, do the right thing.
Jeremy Corbyn, Corbyn, in their ad that they just put out,
But
gotta give them claps for that.
The ostensible left wing in the United States is a center-right party that will not stand up for justice if the whole constituency stands behind it. They're literally their entire party, their entire base is against Kavanaugh being elected, and yet Tom Perez will go on this panel, this talk show or whatever, and say voting for Kavanaugh is totally fine. Okay.
We have, the Republicans. The Republicans have a bad idea. The Democrats help sell it. This is why primaries matter, folks. Anybody who voted for raising the military to the highest spending that it's going to be doing since the height of the Iraq and Afghanistan war. Any Democrat that voted for Gorsuch, any Democrat that's been voting against your interests and been siding with Republicans on the sake of bipartisanship, you should be voting out of office. And there's a couple Michigan senators that Michigan senators and House of Representatives that definitely need to get voted out.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
So, it's 6 o'clock. We're supposed to take a break. But, the last thing I'm going to say on this is, this is the reason why primaries matter. This is the reasons why we need to get out and vote and make sure our voices are heard, because we can do more. We can cause more change when we are active and active, like how Bernie Sanders and Ro Khanna did, than waiting for mealy-mouthed buffoons like Tom Perez to make sure that he's leading with his values and hoping that he's going to do what we want instead of fighting with people who are on our side.
Yeah, and I guess my little closer to that is just, I hope this is illustrative of the fact, right now the Democrats trying to ramp everybody up for blue wave, blue wave, blue wave. And we got to be conditional because, if we just have a bunch of Tom Perez's or Joe Manchins representing us, then what's the point? It's they're not going to be as destructive as Republicans most of the time, but they're not going to do anything for us. They're not going to stand up for us. They're going to stand up for corporations and do a lot of the same, horrible, pro-corporate, anti-people policies, but, basically have a friendlier face on it, slap a coexist bumper sticker on that corporate subsidy, But, yeah, that's why primaries are important, and that's why holding your own politicians accountable is so important, because a lot of the time, a lot of the people in part of the establishment Democratic Party will tell you that's a bad thing. You shouldn't criticize fellow Democrats. You shouldn't eat your own, blah, blah, blah. Let me make it very clear. A center-right Democrat is not one of my own, and I will cajole and yell and raise my voice until I can push them to do the right thing.
Yo, Pro Kazoo, I know y'all better be talking about this story, and I know y'all better be angry. Yo, some of the other Democratic sites that's on Facebook and stuff, I better see this as a topic, and people better be railing off on this topic.
That's right. All right,
take a break.
Yeah, let's take a quick little break. Y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Today is Giving Day at Western Michigan University.
Here's how you can support WIDR and be a part of WMU's Giving Day at the same time. First, head to WIDRFM.org. Then click on the Support WIDR button. Click on Make a Gift, and under Special Instructions, put in WIDR. It's that simple.
Be a part of Giving Day at WMU and keep it tuned to 89.1 FM.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So I want to talk about a local, basically some hate crime nonsense going on the north side. And I don't know if you wanted me to start, because we mentioned, so why don't you give people the context first, and then got some additional stuff to talk about around it, but let's let the people know what happened and where it happened at.
All right, on Park Street, a few nights ago on the 30th. I mean, this is the bad part about our show being on a Wednesday. We don't cover stuff when it happens, and this is also the reason why I started doing my Facebook Live, Lawrence Calvert.
Every Friday?
Every Friday. Yep. It's either Friday or Saturday. If it's not at Friday at 9 o'clock, then it's Saturday at 6 or at 5:30. It's Lawrence Calvert on Facebook. If you want to check out the live stream that I do with me and my friend Chris. On Park and Rose, there was some vandalism on a children's playground, on the baby slides of the children's playground. For some reason, the N-word with the ER and 3 swastikas was drawn in spray paint on the slide of the playground. I don't know if people have cleaned it up or not. I don't know if it's been cleaned up or not. I don't know anything about it that's happened past this point. But neo-Nazi symbol and swastikas being drawn on children's playground in Kalamazoo. It's a little upsetting.
Yeah, oh man. So I'm just gonna chime in here. So something important to realize about Kalamazoo is, when it comes to like kind of anti-fascist activity and kind of keeping an eye out for like white supremacists around here, Kalamazoo, while there's not a lot of like open white supremacy and white supremacists, at least not super often, Kalamazoo is surrounded by a lot of areas that have high white supremacist Klan type activity, and also some of these newer kind of these newer groups. I'd say like people who are in like the kind of traditionalist Workers' Party, Richard Spencer mold, who are trying to like kind of revamp white nationalism to be more respectable. Here is some activity I have noticed in the area, and please keep your eye out for this if y'all have heard of the Proud Boys. Now, if you would ask them, they would say, we are not Nazis, we are not white supremacists, we believe in the supremacy of Western culture and civilization.
That's very Jordan Peterson of them.
Yes, exactly. They'll probably be quick to show you a picture of like, see, here's a member of ours who is brown. See, we're not racist. But they have been known to come into town and try to disrupt some of the more recent kind of liberal rallies that we have here downtown. I heard there's even some of them down at the park at Bronson during the homeless the night when people were protesting the eviction of the homeless camp. I want y'all to know, because I'm in a lot of like kind of anti-fascist circles. I keep track of this stuff. A lot of people don't know. Proud Boys, they have a specific uniform. They usually wear black polo shirts with gold stitching. They'll have like the Make America Great Again hats. They might have some like paraphernalia on them, like, Pepe the Frog and all that stuff. But yeah, if you see them, that's what that is. And while they claim that they are not racist, basically it is an extension of it's basically if you look at like the things they stand for and what they believe in, it's somewhere in between the virulently xenophobic racist rhetoric of the Trump administration and like a full-blown KKK member. And they only tolerate people of color to the extent that they basically see that Western civilization is the best, and that's what we want to be part of. But yeah, they have been known to harass protesters in the area, go to protests and try to disrupt. And we mentioned, I don't know if there's look, I'm not going to try to accuse people of doing this, but I do know around the same time that this playground got tagged, there were some Proud Boys who got noticed over at Shakespeare's, and then I believe also Louis'. And at Shakespeare's, they refused to serve them. Louis', they refused to serve them except for at the bar. So there are people like that around, and you see some people like that. Well, as they say, see something, say something. And while it's very hard to prevent these racists from tagging our playgrounds and stuff in the middle of the night like cowards, if you do see them around, because some of them are dumb enough to go out in the light of day and show their colors, just treat them like you would a white supremacist, because that's what they are, man.
Look, I don't condone violence. I'm all for non-violence, and as Malcolm X once said, I'm for non-violence for people who want to be non-violent. So people who are non-violent, I am proud to be non-violent with you.
Oh yeah, and I wasn't necessarily even saying that. I'm just saying especially I gotta praise Shakespeare's for refusing to serve that group.
My thing is this. I'm not for people wanting to get into confrontations, because normally the radical right wing will be armed and will be dangerous. So please be safe. But if smoke comes,
That's why you should join the Socialist Rifle Association.
right? Hey,
Sorry,
I
we have a
don't.
little
I don't even. No.
divergence
Here's
on
the
that
here's
one,
the thing. Here's
but
the thing. I support that. I support them. I support that as well, man. If you want to be armed, you want to be safe, do so. If you want to take self-defense classes, do so. I'm all for self-preservation. My thing is this: I'm not for people getting violent, but if you see Proud Boys and they want smoke, then please do. I will tell you not to oblige them, but if they come after you, dog, please defend yourself.
Please defend yourself.
Please defend yourself, bro.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Well, we're getting a phone call. I think, like, here's what I tell most people. It's really hard for us to take calls on air when we're doing the show. We do have a break coming up in about 15. Looks like my co-host is about to take that. So, but, I really did want to close on that topic just by saying, really just be vigilant and pay attention to what's going on in the community. It's really important to make sure that, we don't have any fascists or proto-fascists running around in our precious little hamlet. So I think with that, I'm going to introduce the next story. And this kind of going along with, something that happened in the midst of the Kavanaugh hearings, and this is a particular tactic of the right, where when there is a big national dialogue or controversy happening, particularly ones that have been caused by the Trump administration, they will use it as cover to put a really unpopular bill through. Kind of try to do it when nobody's noticing. It's kind of Naomi Klein describes it really well in her book No Is Not Enough, where the Trump administration and the GOP have embraced a kind of shock politics where they will pile on so many atrocious things at once that it's hard for activists to hone in and tackle each issue individually. And unfortunately, I've got to bring you the bad news. The GOP was very successful with this tactic last week. Because while the Kavanaugh hearings were going on, they passed another tremendous tax cut for the rich. And I want to bring this is an article from Fortune magazine. It's usually a bit more economically to the right, but they were willing to point this out. Headline is, Under the Fog of Kavanaugh, House passes $3.8 trillion more in tax cuts. And I'm just going to read a little bit from this article. While attention fixed on the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearings, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a new $3.1 trillion tax cut on Friday. The vote was 220 to 191, including 3 Democrats. Again, we were just talking about this. I bet Tom Perez is going to be like, oh, you did a good job. You just got to keep putting hope on the ballot. Hope and tax cuts for billionaires, So it goes on to say the Down to the Wire 2017 Tax Act passed in late December contained a mix of permanent and temporary changes that had to result in a net increased cost that fell within a structural limit of $1.5 trillion. Allowed the Senate to approve the bill with a simple majority. The House's new bill takes effect starting 2025 and would add $600 billion to the national debt within the next decade, and then $3.2 trillion in the 10 years after that.
All right. Okay, so
I was a bit speechless myself.
Here's the thing. I have a couple things that's going on in my head right now. For those who do not understand how bad this is, I mean, first of all, let's note for the record that Republicans are hypocrites. That when they say they care about balancing the budget,
the deficit,
or they care about the deficit, that is a lie.
That is such a big lie.
That is an absolute lie. So let's note that for the record. Second of all, these extra tax cuts. What have Republicans been saying after the last tax cuts? Well, we have to find a way to pay for them, so we're going to have to cut Social Security,
Medicare,
and Medicaid. So when Donald Trump went to his recent rally and said Democrats wants to cut Medicare to pay for socialism, which was one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life. None of the people in the crowd realize that they're snatching money out of your pocket to give to millionaires and billionaires, and that you voting for Trump and people like them, all they're doing is making sure that their millionaires and billionaires and their corporations and the people that pay them to get reelected make more money, and that you're going to suffer for it. And let's not also forget that this tax cut, including the military increase that we just did, we're putting an extra trillions of dollars on the on the backs of Americans, on the backs of average working Americans. Besides the fact that taxes are going to go up for the average American over the next 10 years for everyone who makes over $75,000 or more. Besides all that, this is making a bigger hole for millennials, Gen Xers, Gen Yers, and everyone else that's behind us. The reason why people in our generation and below us do not buy cars, do not buy homes, all we do are rent, and we're working multiple jobs, is because of garbage like this. Yeah. But the fact that you don't hear this type of conversation on mainstream media without the neutrality bias of how it will actually affect us is the problem. Is the absolute problem.
Yeah, and well, one point, and then I wanted to squeeze another similar related story in.
I do want to talk about the phone call that we just had.
Oh, please.
Okay. So this goes back.
Ahead.
This goes back to our last story. Our last story where we were talking about the Proud Boys and the vandalism that just happened on the north side. One of the callers called in and said that he's a white man. He was at Louis at the time when they were there, and they were trying to spew their rhetoric towards him.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And it was.
Yeah.
He said it happened like 7 days ago.
Yeah.
So the thing is that they're gonna try to, as the caller said, he said they're gonna try to incite violence by not just besides what their action is with the rhetoric that they're saying. They know what they're saying is. Well,
I know they try to incite people.
Yeah, they know what they're saying is disrespectful. They know what they're saying is regressive. They know what they're saying is offensive to people. So they're planning on doing so. I'm asking my people, and I'm asking anybody who's listening to this, do not take the bait. Don't take the bait. Laugh at these men who compensate for their lives and compensate for the fact that they're mostly incels who don't get none from women. These men who are compensating because they can't get none. Do not fall for the rhetoric. These are sad men who are only doing this because they don't have anything else in their lives that's actually worth a damn. So, no, don't fall for it. But again, like I said, if they come up to you and they want smoke, please defend yourself. Because we're not for violence, but please defend yourself. But off of that, this tax cut, this extra tax cut, and the fact that we had 3 Democrats vote for this extra tax cut shows you that our representatives do not represent us, because polling just came out 2 weeks ago. 86% of our country wants to raise taxes on the millionaires and billionaires of this country. I mean, not 86%. It was not 86. It was 68. I'm sorry. So that's even including Republicans. 68%. I got the numbers backed up, so that's what happens when you're dyslexic. 68% of Americans want to raise taxes on the millionaires and billionaires of this country.
And I wondered if you remember. You might remember off the top of your head, but so it's $3.2 trillion over 10 years. And how much did they project Medicare for All would cost? It was somewhere in that ballpark, right?
Over the next 10 years, Bernie Sanders' plan when it was his plan in 2016, his Medicare for All his Medicare for All bill would have cost $80 billion.
Yeah.
And it would have been $80 billion over the next. It would have been $80 billion every year for the next 10 years.
So, yeah, it's, I got to go back to something that AOC said. She made a tweet about this. Is like, when it comes to war and finding tax cuts for billionaires, it never seems to be a problem for us to invent that money. But when it comes to social programs that would benefit working class people, they always ask, how are you going to pay for it?
I mean, it's the same thing with tax cuts. It's like this. There's not a middle class tax cut that I don't like. Like, let's be clear. Cutting taxes for the overwhelming majority of Americans, overwhelming majority of Americans, people who make $75,000 or less, I am absolutely okay with.
Oh yeah,
I'm all about that life. When we're cutting taxes on people like Jeff Bezos, and I know, and we just gave Jeff Bezos praise earlier in the podcast, so I ain't trying to step on what I'm saying. But people like Trump and other multi-millionaires and billionaires, and we're giving tax cuts to those corporations, and we're going to fund those tax cuts by cutting social programs that the overwhelming majority of Americans need. That's when I have a problem. I have a problem because we've seen that the tax cuts that has already been given to millionaires and billionaires earlier last year and earlier this year did not create growth. They did not. Nope. What happened was, the CEOs and the chairmen of companies like Apple and other companies just rebought their own stock. So they artificially inflated their own stock prices.
Yeah.
That's how the Roaring '20s turned into the Great Depression.
That's right.
That's how the when we talk about the Great Recession, what was going on? The housing market, derivatives was the gun, because people at Goldman Sachs, and I forgot to do, we just talked about this story a few weeks ago. CEOs at Goldman Sachs and other companies, they were selling product to their customers that they on the back end was betting against. So they made money in the short term by selling bunk and garbage, and then they made money on the back end by hedging their gambling against the things that they were selling.
Yeah.
So they screwed over the American people twice.
Yep, I sure did, man. So I want to take about the next 10 minutes or so, and do you want to talk about this, Trump's NAFTA 2.0 thing? Because I feel like this is another story that really didn't get a lot of attention because of, everything that was going on with Kavanaugh, and this is pretty big.
There's a couple stories that we need to talk about. We need to talk about Trump and how he actually made his money.
Yeah, that's important too.
We need to talk about some international news. Indonesia's a thing. That whole thing with Indonesia right now with the tsunami, that and how it's tied to climate change and how it will be getting worse. We touched on the prison strike, but we didn't get a chance to touch on it. The aftermath of it.
That's true.
And we definitely need to talk about that. Let's take a quick break so we can figure out what we're gonna do next.
Let's do that. Yeah, we got a lot of stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
This is a Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
WIDR would like to remind you others as well. If you find yourself stranded somewhere, consider calling. WIDR would like to remind you to please drive safely. Drunk driving not only puts your life in danger, but the lives of others as well. If you find yourself stranded somewhere, consider calling Drive Safe Kalamazoo, phoning a friend, or having an Uber pick you up. Thank you for listening.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. So my co-host's got to be taking off pretty soon, so I want to let him do like some quick hits before he has to go. But a couple of topics I really want to hit on to, including like this new NAFTA-esque proposal.
Oh yeah, we need to talk about that.
And I'm going to probably close out the show later, giving an update about the homeless protest. But Lawrence?
No, let's talk about NAFTA real quick. Let's talk about the new NAFTA.
Okay, so, here's the thing. You're hearing praise from Trump, Trudeau, and the current Mexican president, Enrique Peña Nieto. And it reminds me of an old George Carlin joke. Beware when there's bipartisan support for something, because it means both sides are coming together to screw us all over. So,
true.
Yeah. So here's
you gotta get the two change. True.
And here's the thing. It does actually go after some of the negative things that NAFTA did. It does make it so it's kind of like it's doing a few positive things while sneaking some negative stuff right in there under everyone's radar. I think the best example of that is it scales back the ability for corporations to sue state governments. So they can't just do that. And that was kind of part of the proposal with the TPP as well. However, what it does do, and this is the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement that's proposed to replace NAFTA, the USMCA. Even Bloomberg has called it more of a rebranding than a revolution.
The thing that bothers me, not to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead. Yeah.
The thing that bothers me about this new policies is that it's sneaking in things from the TPP in it.
Yeah.
Some of the worst things about like the environment. The environmental tribunal.
There's bad stuff.
The environmental tribunal when it comes to American sovereignty, when it comes to our land and corporations wanting to pollute.
Yeah, and the big thing I wanted to, so the kind of trick that they're playing is they're scaling back those tribunals privately. However, any corporation that has a federal contract with either the Mexican, United States, or Canadian government, so for example, the Keystone XL pipeline, the Dakota Access pipeline, etc., will have that kind of power to supersede local and state governments under this agreement. That's so bad. It's, while Trump likes to puff himself up and say like, oh, we're going to maintain our own sovereignty, we're not going to let some bureaucratic tribunal hold power over us. What it's basically saying is like, oh, as long as this corporation has state approval, then they can function, that tribunal can function in exactly the same way.
Forgetting the fact that it's the corporation that gets to pick the judges on the tribunal.
That's right. Yep.
That's the other part about this that is that's insane. If you were going to court for something that you did and you got to pick the people on the court, you got to pick your jury.
Yeah.
What have you When has that ever functioned positively for anyone?
Yep. And
except the guilty.
Yeah, and just to make this concrete, so this is a quote from, I believe, what the Huffington Post said. Under the rules, firms that have or may at some point obtain government contracts to drill or build infrastructure like pipelines and refineries in Mexico, such as ExxonMobil, can challenge new environmental safeguards, such as what the new Mexican president-elect, a lot of people will say he's like the Mexican Bernie Sanders, just got elected president down there, has vowed to erect. It's like saying, from here on, we're going to protect the henhouse by keeping all animals away except for foxes. They're cool, said Ben Beachy, director of the Sierra Club's Living Economy program. Yep.
Oh my God! If we had a soundboard, I would be dropping one of Clues bombs for that right there. I would be that. I'm gonna get a soundboard app on my phone so I could drop one of Clue bombs for that. Because man, that was amazing. That's so true.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so true.
And so like it really is a mixed bag. Even I was listening to Democracy Now!, and they had a guest on to talk about who's a representative from a group like Public Citizen, and she pointed out, so while the investor tribunals are being scaled back in that sense, it also gives a lot of power to, not only, the fossil fuel industry, but there's going to be some really outrageous giveaways to big pharma that are going to be included in there. Also, however, it does include some improved labor standards, and there's a fairly more improved U.S.-Mexico labor rights agreement, but it's a big trade-off, the destructiveness to the environment that is entailed by this new agreement, and the fact of the matter that it's still like giving these huge corporate handouts. It's extremely problematic. And of course, the Trump administration, Fox News, and even I'm going to guess CNN, MSNBC are probably going to be parading around how the improvements that this makes on NAFTA. But it's also, it's like robbing Peter to pay Paul with some of this stuff, man. Yeah.
It's robbing Peter to pay Paul because Big Mike owes, because you owe money to Big Mike. That's what it is.
There you go.
Like, it's not a... The thing is that I have a problem with. We need to speak more in depth on this topic, especially on another show.
Yeah.
Because the nuance of this trade bill, there's so many layers to it.
And I think it's gonna be developing. Like, keep in mind, like, it was just announced, and a lot of it is still being negotiated between the Mexican, American, and Canadian governments. And it'll be really interesting to see how like it plays out with the new president-elect of Mexico, who again, part of his campaign was railing against the provisions in NAFTA. And while the current Mexican president, who leads conservative, likes this agreement, I haven't really heard what he's had to say about it.
The other thing that I have a problem with is that we're doing this trade agreement while he's still doing tariffs, and the tariffs will be affected by this trade agreement. And we have outsourced over 80,000 jobs. We've outsourced more in Trump's administration than President Obama, than George Bush. He's outsourced more than his two previous predecessors.
Yeah,
like,
but he'll make a show of like, hey, I'm visiting the steel plant in Ohio that I kept open, and he'll have like a couple of these just like, I kept these few things that he trots out for show to make everybody believe that he's doing a good job and keeping with his campaign promises. But if you look at the actual numbers, it's a joke.
But that's the thing. Yeah. Like Vice. Vice News sometimes does bad reporting, and then they're mixed. Vice News is a mixed bag. Overwhelmingly majority, like 75 to 80% of the time, I love Vice. Vice does really good reporting. They did a reporting on Trump's tariffs and him bringing back jobs. They showed that there's some factories. There's one or two factories that are still being operate, like in Indiana and stuff. But the majority of the cities or towns that they go to, those factories are shutting down and moving. Harley Davidson is a great example of that. Because of the tariffs and because of the trade agreement, Harley Davidson is no longer going to be making a majority of their stuff in America. They're getting their steel and other stuff from other countries because of President Numbnuts.
Yep, exactly. Lawrence, was there anything else you really wanted to talk about before you had to take off?
What was something else I want to talk about? Colin Kaepernick's partner in crime is now playing in the NFL again, in his first live in his and the what is it called? The briefing, the press thing that they do with the NFL players. The conversation that he started off with in that type of thing, and him doing future protests in the NFL, I thought that was really, really dope. Elizabeth Warren said that she might be running for president, and that was something that I wanted to talk about with us, but we talked about it earlier in the show. I have a couple other more quick hits. I'm not gonna get more into it. I'm just gonna tell everybody that this election coming up matters. We need people to come out and vote. I just need for my Democratic Party people to stop acting like they're trying to lose. That's all. That's We talked about Andrew Gillum before. We talked about Gretchen Whitmore. Like
I say, everybody keep your eye. Dana Nacelle has really been unwavering. She is a progressive who got through and clinched her nomination. And while we've criticized Gretchen for kind of hemming and hawing on stuff like Line 5 that we started the show out with, she's just been firm. Day one, I'm going to sue their asses. That's what Dana said. So, yeah.
I support that, but I got to go.
All right. Thank you, Lawrence, for joining the show. I think I want to spend the last 20 minutes or so bringing it back down to the local level. We've got a lot to talk about. Updates on the homeless encampment. And there's some kind of a breaking news story, some good news that came out of the county commission. And I really wanted to make sure to give some props where props are due, and also let everybody know just what is going on with that. So at the county commission last night, they allocated about $500,000 for housing assistance, and this is in response to a lot of the pressure that's been put on the city for the homeless, from the homeless and the encampment. I'm gonna read a little bit from the article and then kind of chime in with some of my own insider knowledge. So it was a party line vote, 6-5. All of the Democrats voted for this, and what it is, it's going to allocate $500,000 for housing assistance to the 2019 budget. Kevin Werdelman, he's finishing out his term as county commissioner. His replacement is running unopposed, Paul Haig. Just so you remember, that's in kind of like a lot of the Vine is covered by that, as well as parts of the Weston Chill neighborhood. He introduced the budget amendment. It will move money from a delinquent tax fund to the county's housing commission. Werdelman said the money is needed to assist low-income individuals and families and reduce homelessness in the community. Republican Treasurer Mary Balkema, she was against this. And, we talked about Scary Mary a lot on the show before, how she's engaged with a lot of unfair housing practices, particularly with the Kalamazoo Land Bank. But I will bring up what she had to say about it and kind of the minutia of it. And Werdelman, he went on to say, we should recognize there's not nearly enough money to solve the problem. This would be a drop in the bucket, but I think it is something we are able to do. Given the rather urgent need of people in our community, now is the time to act. The Public Housing Commission will need to come up with a plan to use the money by next April. So just to talk a little bit about this, the Public Housing Commission usually receives about $125,000 each year from the general fund, and $800,000 from the millage that passed in 2015. Also helps subsidize rent for families with school-age children. The delinquent tax revolving fund, it's made up of late taxes collected by the treasurer and redistributed to local taxing jurisdiction. Treasurer pays taxing jurisdiction like cities, townships, libraries, and schools millions of dollars each year to make up for late tax payments that it collects from citizens. So Balkema said that she needs around $11 million to give back each year. It kind of varies each year. This year she calculated there's about an $800,000 surplus. That $500,000 is coming out of that. And Balkema said she has no issue spending surplus dollars, but she tried to assert that it's her responsibility to determine how much. Of course, she didn't want to allocate any money for this, which again, I think kind of speaks to her background and her problematic background in housing. And she said that we should hold on to that money in case of an emergency. Wertelman fired back on that. He said, we've been sitting on the surplus. Board has not touched it. The reality is those public funds, it's our responsibility to determine how to spend it. I'm not comfortable with anyone sitting on a slush fund that big, and the most pressing need is resolving our homelessness issues in the city primarily. And it basically said, homelessness is an emergency. And Jack Urban, who's one of the city commissioners, actually visited the county commission and made it known that he feels, while a lot of the homeless people's efforts has been directed at the city, this is a county-wide problem. And if we're going to really do what's needed to take it on, we're going to need the collaboration of not just city, but also the city with the county and a lot of the surrounding municipalities like, Portage, Comstock, et cetera, et cetera. The homeless problem that exists in Kalamazoo grows out not just of Kalamazoo, but out of a lot of the satellite cities around it. We're all really going to have to work together to address it. So, Commissioner Urban, he said the encampment in Bronson Park is a symptom of a larger problem. It really requires, I believe, to be addressed by all the governments in the county. It's not just a city of Kalamazoo problem. And, I got to give Jack Urban some credit. I was at a city commission meeting on Monday, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in a minute. And he talked about being very supportive of housing first policy, but saying that we got to be realistic about it and money has to be attached to it. I've been very vocal personally about how, the resources are there. As one of the citizens' commentators said at the commission on Monday, in particular, about $10 million is set aside from the Foundation for Excellence to deal with poverty in this city. Why isn't that being used for this housing issue, this housing first initiative? The money is there, and I completely agree with Commissioner Urban. Money's got to be attached to it for us to make it seriously for this policy to develop. But if that money doesn't materialize, that's really an indictment of how our city spends its resources, rather than saying that we don't have the resources to do it, because we certainly do. I would say, look at. I feel like. I was going to mention, we could start a GoFundMe with the citizens of the city. There would be people to pay for it. My indictment really is, we're talking about the power dynamics of the city, the billionaires who really own the city. And this was another thing that another citizen brought up on Monday at the city commission meeting, is that you shouldn't put all the responsibility on the city commission, because, really, they're not the ones who pull the strings in the cities. It's the Strikers, the Upjohns, the Parfets, the Johnsons, people who kind of started that excellent foundation. To them, I have to say, if you don't take care of your homeless people, your working class people, they will not take care of you. And, if you keep pushing them out and not giving them options, giving them a place to live, we talk a lot about the privileged liberals who are really against this camp, who want a downtown that does not have homeless people in it. Who cooks your food? Who changes your beds at the hotels in this city? As we were talking about last week, somebody I talked to at the homeless camp and was featured in an MLive article, there are homeless people who are working 60, 70 hours a week at places like the Comfort Inn who still can't afford a house in this city. And that is shameful. We got to do something about that. And you know what? If the billionaires have the foresight to understand how that will help the city and them in the long run, then they should be some of the first people to invest in this housing first policy. Of course, that bucks against a lot of interests when it comes to gentrification, trying to make Kalamazoo more tailored to kind of a bourgeoisie, liberal and conservative class who go downtown and enjoy it on the weekends. But again, like I said, the wheels of the city don't turn without the working class, some of whom have homes and some of whom who don't. And more of the working class are struggling to have homes in this city because they are being pushed out, because rents are going up, because particularly chunks of the North Side and the Vine neighborhood are getting gobbled up by corporations like Berkshire Hathaway, who are selling it up to more privileged, economically upwardly mobile people who want to live closer to downtown. So, again, I kind of went on a tangent there, but I do want to give my appreciation to the county commission for throwing some resources to the homeless issue in this county. I would ask the Republicans to really wonder, they talk about saving this money for an emergency. These people, winter is coming. These people need housing. How is that not an emergency? An emergency for whom, To not assume that people not having shelter is not an emergency is a very privileged and kind of gross way to think, in my humble opinion. So I want to kind of close this out by playing some footage from the city commission meeting. One of the more really most useful parts of it. So Shannon Sykes, if you haven't been following, she's been one of the commissioners who have really been coordinating the most with the homeless encampment, actually kind of spending time down there volunteering, spending time at the camp. Excuse me. She was able to give a really illuminating update. It's been kind of hard for me to figure out what's been going on with the encampment and the protesters since then. Well, I know a lot of the organizers personally. I've been down there a lot myself. The closing of the camp, the eviction of the camp that happened while I was actually out of town, it's been hard for me to keep track of what's actually been going on down there and what happened in the aftermath of the eviction. And I'm going to play this clip from the city commission meeting because Shannon was able to give people a very informative update about what has been going on since. And in the spirit of making sure that all of my listeners are well informed about what's going on with that, I'm going to go ahead and play this clip.
Just later that day, after we had been released and folks were scrambling to figure out where everybody had gone, because a lot of people had left the camp in time, and we're all spread out. I got frantic calls about the fact that people had gone to other places that up until then, homeless people had been allowed to stay, and officers were coming to tell them they had to go. And if they didn't leave, then they would experience the same thing they had experienced in Bronson Park. Just to be clear, I was able to clarify both with the city manager and the assistant chief that the instructions were no camping in public property anywhere. And so I think that the encampment caused folks to go a little bit further in enforcing that. I received frantic calls from folks who had moved over to the drop lot mission, the mission encampment. Scared because folks were selling metal bats, folks had weapons, folks' lives had been endangered, and people were afraid to go to sleep because we hadn't had that experience in the encampment like that. We went to move folks who were scared from the mission to gym and church. And mission security started asking us who we were, what are we doing here, and they showed me a picture and said, well, that guy right there looks like this guy. The guy in the picture was somebody from out of town that apparently somebody had called in with a report that he was picking up homeless people and stealing from them and dropping them off in the middle of nowhere, and he pointed to my husband, Ryan Nearing, who he thought looked like this gentleman, so he was very, very untrusting. Either way, we got folks packed up and moved. We moved them to the church's gymnasium, and as we were getting folks settled in, we received a call that the police had just left my house. That evening, when we got home, my husband, Ryan Nearing, called them back and said, okay, I'm home now, you can come on back by. Officer came back and spent about 30 minutes questioning my husband on how he looks like the man in this picture. I cannot describe how absurd I find that. And his main objective was to ask, where are they? Where are they? Over and over and over. Where are they? And my husband said, I'm sorry, they're scared, they're traumatized. They don't want to know where they don't want me to share their location, so I'm not going to. I really need to know where they are. And he never gave their location up. And over again, he heard how, well, we're just concerned about him. We got this report. You look like this guy. And my husband said, my name is Ryan Nearing. I'm married to Shannon Sykes Nearing. You are at our home. You obviously know who I am. You know who my wife is. So you know whoever this person is in the picture is not me. But again, gotta know where they are so we can make sure they're okay. The folks slept one night in the gymnasium. They were supposed to have 2 nights, but unfortunately, somebody found out their location. The news showed up, Channel 3. And because, get this, a nonprofit housed there had lost a $20,000 donor because they had made the mistake of being caught in photographs talking to members of the encampment in Bronson Park. That donor had withdrew his funds. And so because folks found out that the encampment folks were in the gym, they had to leave immediately or risk the finances of this nonprofit. So hotel rooms were booked for the encampment members. And we frantically, man, I don't know if any of us have ever, maybe y'all have, I have never moved that fast. Packed up everybody's belongings, got folks loaded up in trucks and vehicles, and all these people volunteering to drive and getting everybody settled into the hotel rooms. And it was like, okay, let's breathe, have a good night, get some sleep. We will get together in the morning, we will figure out next steps. Before I got out of bed the next morning, I got a frantic call. The police are here. They're knocking on our doors. They're asking us questions. What do we do? And I said, why don't you tell them, hold their questions, I'm ordering an Uber now, I'll be there shortly, and they can ask me their questions. By the time I got there, KDPS was gone. I listened as folks described the fact that not only now did our officers have a picture of this Mike Carl person, who none of us know, they also had pictures of the residents of the encampment. This is what they're telling me when I show up. They're looking at pictures of themselves. So I call the assistant chief and I say, hey chief, what's going on? I don't understand. Why? They haven't done anything wrong. These hotel rooms were booked specifically for them. Why are they still feeling like they need to run? And I was told, well, this Mike Carl guy, we're just trying to make sure they're okay. We just need to make sure they're okay. And I said, well, your officers have been here. You've seen them. You've spooked them, scared them. You know they're okay. Well, I'm sure you want us to fully investigate. Investigate what? Because the guy in the mission, at the mission encampment, was my husband, Ryan Nearing. So what are we still investigating? So, and I have to apologize to him because I did tell him I would get everybody together and come to a neutral public location so that he could put eyes on everybody, even though he had, their officers had done so already, and I didn't. And it wasn't because I wanted to go back on my word, it was because, as I'm sure y'all can imagine, it is hard to transport as many people as we're trying to transport. I'll also share, without giving any names or any sort of indication, we did have an offer for land on private property, and then the person making the offer had to rescind it because they had received a phone call that they would be fired if they allowed the homeless encampment on their property. At this point, members of the encampment are scattered. And to somebody's comment earlier, I can't remember who said it, people are sleeping under the bridges. They are. People are sleeping in an encampment behind the mission. People are sleeping in the mission in the conditions that we lied about being in the park. The things we said were in the park that were not in the park are at the mission. Sometimes I wonder if, we took inspiration from the situation at the mission. People are sleeping, yes, 30 adopted family members are sleeping in Portage. I mean, folks are all over the place. And we're trying to figure out, how do we come back together? How do we organize again? How do we go back to all of the day before, or no, earlier in the day, from the announcement, when we had a whole team of counselors and therapists in the park walking through, not sitting up somewhere next door saying, if you want services, you have to come here. Like actually walking amongst the people and visiting people where they are and saying, I'm here to help you. We also had NA meetings starting up. We had a security team. We had regular daily community meetings where we dealt with all of the issues we were having in a positive way. People were safe, people were fed, people were warm. We don't have that now. And so I cannot describe to anybody how difficult it has been to try to figure out how to show up for folks when everybody's all over the place. And do we really expect folks are gonna be in the workshop, in the work group meetings now? People are displaced. People have lost everything they own. We already had a problem with IDs. Now even fewer of them have IDs because we bulldozed everything they own. Back to updates. So yes, it's been crazy. We have also had an encampment that was set on fire. I want to be really clear, I am not making any statements about who set that fire. Just offer that as something to let folks know how terrifying it has been for the folks in this encampment since their First Amendment right to protest was denied them. I watched people cry as they packed up and left and said, where am I supposed to go? And I said, I don't know. I'm so sorry. We'll fix this. We will. I told so many people that. And people still, when it gets too much, they cry and get really overwhelmed. Here's the bright side. In spite of all of that, I have never seen a more determined group of people to have their rights honored and their dignity honored. I have never seen a handful of folks got to meet with Angela Davis and get advice and encouragement in the movement. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, Angela Davis told encampment members that the world is watching. And what we do here will have implications that spread far and wide. And so that helped to really solidify folks' determination. This is a family, I cannot overstate it, and I legitimately feel sorry for anyone who did not take the time to come build friendships with these folks, because my life will never be the same.
All right, I think with that, we're going to go ahead and close out the show. I want to thank you all for listening, as always. By the way, if anyone is interested, the Bronson Park Freedom Encampment does still have an ongoing list of needs and donation asks available. You can find it most easily through their Facebook page, the Bronson Park Freedom Encampment. And just stay posted to their social media website on Facebook. That'll be the easiest way for you to really know like how you can help in this continued struggle. So once again, I want to thank y'all for tuning in. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. Until next week, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.